Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis DePasquale from Expedient. Welcome to the Tech Talk session. I'm sure you've seen and heard the Expedient name all day, so sorry to overbear you. I won't. I'll make it short and sweet. But basically, headquartered here in Pittsburgh and continuing to evolve on the cloud and disaster recovery type solutions, and really, just in the last couple of years, we've traditionally saw the AWS, the Azures of the world as kind of the enemy, right? The competitor, and try and get customers to not go to their services and instead leverage our cloud infrastructure as a service options. But now we're becoming more understanding and to the multi-cloud approach where we have direct connections into those hyperscale providers, and there might be applications better suited for them, but also we have a compelling case for some of the other applications to make in a hybrid solution world. So just some food for thought there. And now we're getting to the end of the speakers here. So we have Kevin Miller, who is CEO of LegalSifter, and I'll let Kevin take it away.
Thanks, Dennis. Thank you to the Pittsburgh Technology Council for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. And I want to start by asking you to think about law firms, your lawyers, your outside counsel, and think about the reality that you cannot go to a law firm's website and buy anything. Did you ever notice that? You got to talk to somebody. And that differs wildly from the rest of our experience. We can go to the grocery store, pick out our own food, pay for it ourselves. We can diagnose ourselves online, get prescriptions filled online, get counseling online. We can do our own taxes and have an accountant someplace review our stuff. Self-service is a part of our life. We're used to it in every facet of our consumer life. We're used to it in every facet of our business life. But in the legal space, it's just not that way. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a major survey that was done about a year ago across 53 different countries. I think that was the right number. And they looked across 53 different countries, including the United States, and they found that over the next 2 years, all of us will have at least one major civil legal problem. We'll get divorced, we'll have an issue with a housing purchase, we'll get sued, we'll get injured, we'll have an employment dispute, but some significant civil legal dispute. If you're a veteran, a victim of spousal or domestic abuse, elderly, or, can't remember my fourth, handicapped, those numbers double. Those numbers double. Now, given the reality that you can't go to a law firm's website and buy anything, and you can't, and you guys are all going to have issues, or are having issues to the tune of once a year or once every 2 years, when you have a legal issue around the world, who do you think people call first when they've got one of these issues? Who do you think they call? I'll tell you. The first person they call, over half the time, this same survey found this, over half the time, they call a friend or family member. That's where they get their legal advice from. It's a strategy we learned from Regis Philbin, right? So it's a really bad idea, but that's what we do consistently around the world. In fact, you can't see that number, but 67% of the time around the world, when people have one of these issues, they go to a non-lawyer. Only 1 out of 3 times do they actually call an attorney. Now, why does that happen? Because attorneys are expensive. I've done this slide all over the world. All the numbers are the same all over the world. They're just different numbers. Average American makes $23 an hour. The average attorney costs $260 an hour. This is what we experience day in and day out when we use the legal profession. Now, I want you to think about that law firm again, and I want you to imagine that law firm as a gas station. Just picture more mahogany or something, right? So it's a gas station, and you pull your car up. That car is your civil legal problem or whatever. And what happens at that law firm gas station? Well, a bunch of lawyers jump out, and they take your car, And they change your oil, your tires, do a 10-point inspection. They clean off your seats, change your windshield wipers, flush your radiator, keep your car for like 3 days, and give you a bill that was a little bit higher than you expected. The issue was when you pulled up to that gas station, you just wanted a tank of gas, right? So many times when we go to our attorneys or we want to use the legal profession in general, we just want a tank of gas. But we are afforded a full service experience every single time. Every single time. Now, why is that? Well, a lot of people want to say it's this guy's fault, right? The typical attorney. He tends to look like this, and he tends to be a he, and he tends to have that scowl, right? But it's actually not his fault. See, he thinks and reads and writes for a living. He thinks and reads and writes for a living. And the only technology he uses, for the most part, in his day, outside of the typical email office, and if he does a little bit of research 20, 25 years ago, he uses something called LexisNexis or Westlaw, which allows him to, that put the law library online, but that happened 2 decades ago. Outside of those tools, this is his most significant piece of technology. You've seen them. These yellow notepads, sometimes they're white. They're ubiquitous around the world. And what you won't see is anything that helps this guy do his job cheaper, faster, better. In fact, because he thinks and reads and writes, the only way he can provide service to your car when you pull it up is full service. I used to be a chief operating officer here in Pittsburgh of a couple $100 million business before I jumped into this startup as an investor and a CEO. We're originally out of Carnegie Mellon University, and I've been with the company for 3 years. We just launched our flagship product about a year ago. We'll get there. And I'll tell you, I've managed every function in the enterprise. And inevitably, if I stacked them all up in terms of their ability to leverage technology and process to improve their throughput, there was one function that always finished last, and that was the legal function. And people will tell you it's the lawyer's fault. They don't like technology, they like the billable hour model, but it's not. They think and read and write for a living. Well, I'm here just to talk a little bit about, and we'll do LegalSifter in a minute, just to open your mind to the reality that AI, or specifically NLP and machine learning and big data, specifically has the opportunity to be a silver bullet for the legal profession that we've always been looking for. You know, we wish that lawyers were cheaper, faster, better, don't we? That their speed and their costs were in line with our needs. But they're not, because they're full service all the time. A billable hour model is perfectly fine for a strategic or sticky wicket transaction. It's fine. If I got $1 million transaction, come on, attorneys, bring it on. Make sure I don't do something stupid. But if I've got a $200 transaction or a $500 transaction, it doesn't make sense. And they have no way of getting down there. They have no way of doing it. But when you see headlines like this or headlines like this, what's happened in specifically the last 1 to 3 years in the legal profession is really, really interesting. Now, you've seen headlines like this for a little bit longer than that in something called e-discovery. So when you get sued and you do a bunch of litigation, you go through what's called discovery, and everybody trades boxes and boxes and boxes of information, and that used to be literally all printed out on paper, and people would peel through all that paper, and you pay for hours and hours of lawyer time. Now you can shove all that into a database, and there are machine learning algorithms out there that are chopping up those boxes of data and saying this is relevant to the case and this isn't. Very, very basic stuff compared to some of the other things you've seen over the last couple of hours. That exists. We've seen some dramatic things in research, legal research. You know, people being able to get through, find the right cases and find the right holdings and find the right statutes a little faster. But honestly, folks, this is greenfield territory. The legal profession is an $850 billion profession going to $1 trillion over the next couple of years. The vast, 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 vast majority of it, is done with people. Lawyers die at their desks. They do not make money while they sleep. Everybody else knows how to do that. Lawyers don't because they haven't had this kind of technology. And so the number one thing I can present to you is that, first of all, there are lots of companies that are popping up all over the place in the last couple of years around using AI, using NLP and ML inside of the legal profession to try to transform this profession and take advantage of this opportunity. It's literally the last function that hasn't been automated. All the other functions have had tools that get into the heart of what they do. Marketing, sales, product management, manufacturing. That does not exist in the legal profession, and these companies are trying to do it. Our basic premise is this, that most of the software, most of the technology provided to the legal profession today is provided to the lawyer. And the lawyer sits in between the client and that software. We believe that tomorrow, this is what's going to happen. Now, some of you know LegalZoom. You've heard of Rocket Lawyer. Just to quantify this for you, LegalZoom got a $500 million investment about 60 days ago. They announced it. $500 million. LegalZoom, it reportedly is about a couple $100 million business. Been around for 15 years, something like that. Rocket Lawyer, I think, is about half that size. I really don't know what their size is. That represents 1/5000th of the entire legal market globally. Right? It's collectively Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom, the two names that people think of when they think about self-service lawyering. That represents maybe $300 million in an $850 billion industry. So the opportunity for lawyers to put software in between their clients and themselves, and go back to the gas station analogy, provide self-service and partial service solutions, is really the silver bullet we've all been looking for affordable legal services. We think the market for legal services should be $2 trillion, because most of the lawyering on this planet is done by non-lawyers. And I'm going to specifically talk about our business, contracts. Everybody in this room has some experience with contracts, and they're a pain, right? They're a pain. That stat is from the International Association of Contract and Commercial Managers. 40,000 people, lawyers and non-lawyers, who play around with contracts all day long. And 88% of them think they're lousy to work with, which means the rest of us have no chance. Typically, in a business, you have one of multiple problems. You either have way too many people involved in the contract negotiation process, and everything grinds to a halt after you've shook hands or verbally gotten to some sort of an agreement on the buyer or the sell side. And now you got to run it through 5 or 6 people, and one person's on vacation, another one forgot, somebody else is too busy. That's the first issue. The second issue is you're doing this by yourself. This is true in the consumer market. It's particularly true in the business market. Lots of non-lawyers doing this, but also attorneys. Think about all the redundancies we put in all of our processes. Yet when it comes down to a contract, we tend to rely on one person. I don't know about you, but people are fallible. I don't know if you know that. Right? So we do this all the time. So that's the second issue. Third is lawyers themselves are expensive and too slow. It doesn't make sense to send a $5,000 supply chain contract to an outside counsel who's going to charge me $500 to $3,000. That's not an insurance policy I want to buy. But remember, the lawyer thinks and reads and writes. He or she doesn't have anything that gets into the heart of that workflow and cannot offer you self-service or partial service solutions. How much time? 5? So we built the font's screwy, but we built a product that reads contracts and gives advice using machine learning and natural language processing. You upload a contract that you're negotiating. It reviews it, tells you what you should think about, tells you what you shouldn't sign, and throws it into Word. It's like a first pass review. Has 5 use cases. There are 4 here. The first is when you're reviewing other parties' paper. In every contract negotiation in the world, at least one party's on another party's paper. Think about that. In every contract negotiation in the world, at least one party has to take somebody else's template, digest it, and negotiate it. If you're on the receiving end of that, that's painful. There's nothing to help you. There are lots of solutions to help you create the first draft. You actually don't need machine learning or NLP really to do that. But the review is intensive. You have to know what it says. You have to know what it doesn't say. You have to know what your position is. You need to know what the market position is. Other examples are you're creating your first draft and you want to check your work, Or if you send your draft out and it gets redlined heavily and you need to review it. A fifth example is we want to give it to a supply chain manager, tell them to put their advice in it. When a supplier comes to them and says, hey, you got to buy my product on my template, the supply chain manager says, no problem. I'm going to give you a username and password to our version of LegalSifter. You sift the document. You do the first red line, supplier. That takes out one of those steps in that I have too many people involved. If you need a demo of this, you want to see how it works, just go to our website, watch the homepage for 30 seconds. It'll give you a sense. It takes about a minute or two to run a contract. If you throw a 150-page contract in there, it'll take 10 to 20 minutes. If you throw a 2-page contract in there, it might take 20 or 30 seconds. Now, to get back to the theme of the whole talk and where this is going and why I'm even standing up here, we don't just sell this directly to companies, which we do. That was the other slide. We sell this directly to companies, right? Just like any other SaaS solution. But what we're also doing is we're partnering with law firms around the world, and they're putting their brain inside of our product, co-branding it, and reselling it to their clients. Remember the example of the self-service gas station? And remember, you can't buy anything off of those law firms' website pages. In about 30 to 60 days, you're going to see 8 to 10 law firms around the world pop up on their website an ability to buy a client to come to their website and buy their advice, jurisdictionally specific, co-branded by this contract review solution with a credit card. Try and buy. And the idea is to supplement that full-service business that those law firms have with self-service and partial service solutions. It's just the beginning. It's all completely enabled by ML and NLP. We review 100,000 contracts at a minimum over time. We've gleaned all kinds of models from those contracts on things like assignability or limitation liability or payment terms or start dates. Make sure the right language is there. Make sure the right context is there. Make sure the right clauses are there. Think about how many contracts are done all over the world. They're the most important document in global commerce. They're the least understood. And they're the most painful. They slow down business, time to money, time to cost savings. This is just the beginning. We think that this entire model can be applied to many other facets of the law, including litigation, including all kinds of drafting of all sorts of documents. We've talked to people about reviewing 10Qs and 10Ks and mutual fund prospectus documents and trusts and policy documents, all enabled by our data and our models. Our message to these law firms is serve clients while you sleep. Make money while you sleep. Serve your clients 24/7, 365. If you think about it, in all of our businesses and all of our backgrounds, we've been doing that forever. If a lawyer is not awake, she's not billing. If she's not billing, she's not making money. There are exceptions, of course, to that. It's overly simplistic, but that's generally the model. That's not the way the rest of the world tends to work. I want to end by saying, look, my point here today was just to say, for us, I can show you our models. I can talk about, the details of the data science. But what's interesting for us is we think that this technology is transformative to an industry in a way that's actually unrivaled. Every other industry has gone through a self-service, partial service kind of push, even the medical business at some level. But that's not true in the legal space. And to say that you're going to take an industry and go into self-service, that's not particularly novel. But for the legal industry, it is a major transformation. It is a major transformation. So our mission is to bring affordable legal services to the world by empowering people with AI. And we're going to do it in such a way that we create economic incentives for the law firms to come with us. Our strategy is not to do this against the law firms, but to do it with us. And just to give you a sense of how important this is socioeconomically, if you look across all the westernized countries just to start with, there is a dramatic increase in pro se representation around the world. So you see this in Australia, you see this in the UK, you see this in the United States, more and more middle class, lower upper class people having to represent themselves because you can't afford legal services. This is just the Boston Housing Court just in 2017, where 90% of defendants had to represent themselves. But bigger than that, there are 7.5 billion people on this planet. 80% of the world lives on $10 a day or less. The only attorney they're going to be able to afford is one that uses big data. And we hope to be at the forefront of that. Thank you.